Hey folks, Mythic ODM here. So, Wizards of the Coast released the UA5 results with an interview on August 10th. So let's talk about that. At Gen Con, they stated that they are out of the experimental phase and are now in the refinement phase of the 2024 rule set. Now, they are reverting a ton of things back to the 2014 book. I understand why. They are testing things, got less than stellar results on the feedback, so they're just backtracking to the 2014 rules. They're not pushing forward, and again, I understand the whys. But let's talk about the failings of the testing period. First, they started off strong, but never really told players the parameters of the testing results or exactly what they were looking for. So they stated much later in the process, anything the player scored over 70% would be worked on and likely included. But by not explaining the parameters before, a lot of players were not incentivized to fill out the surveys. The results of the UA1 were not released until UA2 or even UA3 had come out, so that has a potential to skew results. Then the OGL debacle dropped like an atomic bomb right in the middle of this process, and that delayed any forward momentum and likely soured the remainder of the testing. This is the point where Wizards of the Coast should have either just stopped and instead focused their 50th anniversary on a supplement or a real set of adventures that would have taken players from 1st to 20th level in an epic campaign. Maybe bring back the Temple of the Elemental Evil, or re-release Greyhawk as their 50th anniversary setting, along with an adventure path that rivals Pathfinder. Take the PCs from 1st to 20th level. Allow them to reshape the landscape. Or reverse that. Release the adventure path first, collect the results of the adventures, and then reshape the realm with the results of the surveys to really make players feel like they have a hand in creating something exciting for the 50th anniversary. Now, we used to do that in the RPGA. Players that went through adventures within a month of release could fill out surveys, and those results would become canon and affect future adventures or even the regions themselves. It made for a voracious appetite for the players to run these as soon as they could and have their voices heard. Wizards of the Coast could have done so much more. When the OGL hit the fan, it soured the results of any further testing, as I've stated previously. Fans were incensed by what they had tried to do, and they are still angry about it. So when they're asking a very small group of players to make their opinions known, they are not just getting the fans, but the detractors. And things that may have had a chance to change in the rules in a meaningful way have been torpedoed. Trying to craft a rule set by the opinions and asking players who may have no skin in the game or are only focused on specific races or classes or rules likely are just clicking the middle of the road results and as dropping or increasing some values. The 70% threshold is kind of just an odd one, as it is very easy to sway it around with a concerted effort by either side. And I'm no conspiracy nut, but can the players even trust that what they're saying about the test results are even true? There is a design bias that Wizards of the Coast has, with the plan to just revert back to the 2014 rules if things did not hit a threshold. And it may have them looking at a result, say the Warlock getting their spell DCs based off of a stat other than just charisma, and see that it hit 70% or maybe 69%. Nice. And figure that this kind of rework that would be needed is beyond the scope of what they wanted to do or even have time to revise. And they just tell everyone, nah, it didn't hit that magic number we assigned, so out you go. Now, what they did was kind of lying by omission. They never presented the testing criteria up front. And by not telling players what they were using as a base, if something was going to change or not, can change the scope of the responses. If players knew that, for instance, the Warlock would be dialed back to the 2014 version with their casting ability, or Bards would lose the ability to pick their spell list from Primal, Arcane, or Divine, or that those spell lists were just experimental and would revert if it was not a 70% threshold reached, may have seen more players filling out those surveys in a positive way. But it caught a ton of people off guard when they stated in the UA5 review that they would be doing just that. And at this point, it is way too late to change Wizards of the Coast minds. That time has come and gone. No amount of online bitching, myself included, will change these decisions. As I've said before, one of the big factors is the VTT, and it is in deep development at this point. So changing major systems or classes or races would require a good amount of recoding, and that means more money sunk into that project. After Baldur's Gate 3 has been so successful, the VTT could be in a lot of trouble, but I'll address that in another video. There are many that stated that they're making the rules as a committee. And yes, to some degree they are, and then they are not. I truly believe the overall plan was to keep 90% of 5e intact and just polish or add wherever they could minimally to get away with it. Reverting most things back to 2014 is just their way of saying, we proposed something, it was not well received, so back to 2014 we go. This is very lazy rules writing. They could have pursued things a bit more. They introduced races that it could have been reworked to fit better. Classes could have been tweaked a little bit more, but the cycle of putting out some sample rules, waiting months to get the results, launching another UA, then gathering more feedback before even releasing results of the previous one is just confusing and counterintuitive to this process. They're already revising things and moving on before we even know why. Now, I'm not certain how quick they get the results in order to change the next UA, but I would think the order of operations is release a UA, gather the feedback, start the redesign for the next UA, release a UA review video along with the release of the next UA. That way players know what they're changing and why. Knowing that they are reverting back to 2014 spell list as an example could have profoundly changed the way UA6 was reviewed and how players' answers could have changed. They're basing their feedback of the UA6 on things that were already being changed, and it renders a lot of the responses useless or biased by not knowing the full story. So again, they're gathering opinions of a very small portion of the player base. They're saying how many results they're getting, but I would say this is maybe, 2 to 5% of players based on just sales of the PHB alone that they released. Now, lots of players, as I stated previously, do not see the rules as a whole, but they focus on what is important to them, which is the way 90% of people are, and that's not really a bad thing. It's just human nature. Lots of players may have just hit the 5 point in several questions to get to what they really wanted to talk about, and that alone can sway the numbers that Wizards of the Coast is basing their new rules on. It is just not a reliable way to create things. Are there changes happening? Yes. Does it amount to needing a revised core rulebook? I don't really think so. I would have loved to see them really rework the game for balance across the classes or levels, but I don't think that was ever really their intention. Most games stop at level 8 to 10. Not many go past that, as the game gets very unbalanced in the later stages. Baldur's Gate 3 producers, Larian Studios, stated that they had a hard cap of 12th level, as spells at 5th level can completely unbalance the game, and they did not want to have to deal with it. So even this masterpiece that is BG3 knows that the game is janky once PCs hit 13th level, and it is really spells that play heavy into this. Now, I ran Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which takes the players to 20th level. And near the end, I had to maximize every monster's hit points to even have a chance of challenging the PCs. Don't tell my players, I've never told them. Terrain becomes irrelevant with fly, teleport, plane shift. Monsters and PCs get taken out by banishment so often, leaving a player to sit around for what could be hours while the combat flows around them. High level play just doesn't really happen. Even in the new Planescape, the adventure states that it takes the players from 5th to 10th level and then jumps them to 17th level. Likely for the final few encounters or even just the final one, as again, a high level combat can take hours to complete with 6 characters and a DM. I've seen that many times. Now, many people also hate to see change, and these kind of surveys lean towards that bias. But I digress. Wizards of the Coast stated at Gen Con that they will only have 3 UAs left, 7, 8, and 9. I think 7 will see some changes to existing classes and likely feats once again. 8 will see, hopefully, the return of the monk that actually works and can use feats that require martial weapons. 9 will be the final cleanup. Then they're on to the Monster Manual and DMG. They will likely be shooting for an August release of the Player's Handbook, and that will likely release at Gen Con. We will likely start seeing what their VTT will be capable of doing in the next few months as well, and hopefully, what it'll run on, etc. They're calling these the optimization playtests. There are no longer any really new changes that we will see. The whole process has been marred by poor planning and even worse execution. What started as a hopeful and meaningful change to the rules is now just some character tweaks, the addition of weapon mastery for martial classes, and those have been outshone by Baldur's Gate 3 weapon perks and some other tweaks. Is this worthy of a full released Player's Handbook? Again, not really in my opinion, but they're in a damned if we do, damned if we don't situation now. They need to release more books to keep those sales up. They need to tweak enough to make their VTT worth the cost of players and DMs. And we still do not know, as they've never come out on the record with any statements, if the new version will be released into the Creative Commons or even be licensed to other VTT hosts such as Fantasy Grounds, Roll20, or Foundry, etc. Wizards of the Coast could easily tell them that they must stick with 5th edition as is and will not have any access to their updated rules for 1D&D. So what do we know currently about 1D&D? They've removed balanced subclass progression and are back to the 2014s of every class is different, except that they all get subclasses at 3rd level. They removed Warlock spell ability choice, so it's back to Charisma. They removed the Arcane, Primal, and Divine spell lists, and they're reverting that back to 2014. What they're keeping is feats at 1st level. Leveled feats at 4th will stay, so you can't pick those 4th level or higher feats at 1st level. We'll have to see if they bring in any 8th or 12th level feats. That will come in 7, 8, or 9. Refinement of many of the feats will remain, likely tweaked again in 7, 8, 9. Weapon mastery abilities will stay with, again, changes in 7, 8, 9. Customized species that they introduced will also remain. Meta magic will remain as they have in UA5, again, likely with a few more tweaks, such as to twin spell. Class redesigns of the barbarian and subclasses of the fighter and the druid will likely stay after optimization in the UA. Now, monk still needs a total rework. I'd love to see the numbers of how bad the monk did in the survey. If it hit over 30%, I would be surprised. But we'll hopefully see that in UA8. Only time will tell. But they are running out of time, even for minor changes. It still takes months to get the process of printing and shipping sorted out, and I think UA7 will drop probably in September. Then UA8 would be January, and UA9 likely March. They need to wrap up in late April or June to hit an August release date if they are trying to launch at Gen Con. Let's see if in a year, if I'm right on my timeline. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole process that Wizards of the Coast has embarked on in the comments. Do you think it is enough of a change to be a new addition? Do the changes warrant a brand new player's handbook? Are there things that you think Wizards of the Coast could have done alternatively for their 50th anniversary? I would love to know in the comments. Well, that's it for me this week. Thank you all for hanging out with me. If you like what I'm doing, please remember to like and subscribe below and ring that bell for notifications on new videos. And thank you all so much for hanging out with me in this ever crazy realm of tabletop RPG. Happy gaming, and may all your games be full of myth, mirth, and magic.